in a true tradition of London Underground, we're starting just a little bit late, just 1 minute. We just had a conversation, some of us were early, some of us late, and we decided to wait to be a little bit late to match them with the Underground. It's lovely to have you all here. We're particularly pleased as St Peter's Choir, that is, to have St John's Choir joining us and some friends of ours to swell the numbers. So thanks very much indeed. You will notice that on the sheets you have before you, there are some congregational hymns. Please feel free to join in with gusto. If gusto's not here, just join in yourself. But sit back, enjoy yourselves. At the end, Reverend Kate will have a word with you, and I'll hand you straight over to John.
Bearing in mind our theme of underground, overground, really points us in the direction of tube stations. You would not believe the hours that I've spent looking through the later works of Thomas Tallis and William Byrd and other 16th century composers, searching for even just a passing reference to Walthamstow Central, Leytonstone High Road, London City Airport, or Dagenham Heathway, and I drew a complete blank. So the connection between our theme and the pieces we're singing today is thin, to say the least. And in two cases, it's non-existent. Our first piece, Alleluias of St James, well, okay so far, St James Park on the Circle and District lines. Then, O Thou the Central Orb, Central line, connection is still there. And then Autumn Leaves in an arrangement by Philip Norman. First line, autumn leaves fall and are swept out of sight. So, leaves on the line. Now we really are scraping the barrel so far as the connection with the theme is concerned. And then, If Ye Love Me by Thomas Tallis. Well, it's by Thomas Tallis, so enough said about that. Sorry? Thank you. Good, we found the connection. And then finally, praise to the holiest in the height. Well, this is something that Christians should be singing in their churches every week, and in my view, at the tops of their voices, rejoicing in the very length, breadth, depth, height, and beauty of God's whole creation. And if you want evidence of that, then I would invite you just to examine in detail any one of the flower arrangements in church today. Or alternatively, you could simply turn to the person sitting next door to you and look at them. Time for some music. So come on, choir, on your feet. Alleluia.
London refers to this infernal object of his enduring love-hate relationship as the Tube. A few statistics. The Tube totals 280 kilometres of track, of which 1/3 is subterranean. The first subterranean line between Paddington and Farringdon Street was opened in 1863, and that all-important north-south connection in London, the Northern Line, in 1890. By 1900, London had the most modern, electrified underground network. It has now become the most outdated, inefficient and expensive in the so-called civilised world. On average, 2 despairing people throw themselves in front of trains pulling into stations each week. It is also statistically proven that slipping on green grapes is the most frequent cause of accidents on the platforms and passageways of the underground. More frequent even, and this may be surprising, than carelessly discarded banana skins. Because rubbish bins are to be sought in vain on the platforms. They were removed because of the threat of the IRA hiding bombs in them, a threat that has continued from newer sources. There can be no doubt that the Tube is a cultural centre, a social studies subject of the first rank, an experience, an emotive word, a political issue in view of its proverbially poor service. Depending on your taste, you may count on the positive side of the ledger that the Tube offers in its own world of advertising. It brings forth poetry and comforts those who are combating shortage of breath and panic attacks with individually mounted poems arranged at the level of the handrail. The Tube served as an air raid shelter in the Second World War. Buskers are now allowed to perform on colourful platforms, sponsored by a major brewery. The Tube is no place for claustrophobes. any more than it is for talkative types. One can practice instantaneous assessment of people without ever exchanging a word. In the overcrowded carriage, where you come into quite close physical contact with others, not a word is ever spoken. Should the train come to an unscheduled halt in the middle of a tunnel for any length of time, you might hear an appropriately distorted voice whispering some sort of explanation over the tannoy into the sauna-like atmosphere. Anyone tempted to let loose some verbal expression of displeasure amongst these passengers, all pressed together like sardines in a tin, unmistakably reveals himself as a person of limited self-control caused by a deficient upbringing, a foreigner in other words. Everybody reads on the train, and the various reading techniques people develop on the tube are amazing. They bury their glances in printer's ink, turn the pages skillfully, while the rattling and shaking of the train often requires acrobatic adjustments of balance in order to counter the centrifugal force. Often a page is reread several times because despite all efforts or insufficient balancing skills, it is impossible to turn the page. One's glance remains glued to this single page in order to avoid any possible eye contact with fellow passengers. A 1 centimetre gap to the next person must be preserved in all circumstances. The Underground Train by James Spooner. Once you get on the underground train, people stare at you. Their eyes seem to be glued on you from the moment you get on the train until the moment you get off the train. Their eyes look like bronze. No one speaks. They all stay quiet and still. You try to stop looking at them, but you can't. Then some of them look up at the posters on the roof, but they soon stare back at you again. The train stops. Suddenly there is a buzz of conversation. At last you are out. You feel much better.
Am I the luckiest vicar in the world or what? I hope you've had a lovely time here this afternoon. Without you all here, it wouldn't be the amazing event that it is, and I thank you all for coming. I also have to thank my organist, Bob, who puts up with me week to week, and so far for a whole year, and still hasn't gone off screaming. Lovely. And I have to also thank John, who has marshalled us as a choir. And I'd like to thank the choir, and I think you'd like to help me too. Everybody stand up. So I'm going to finish with a poem and then a blessing and send you off. God planted the garden, he nourished the growth, giving birth to man's form in the temple of the earth. He walked in the garden in the glory of light, clothing man's form with the grace of his life. We labour at building and toil in the earth, too busy to notice his absence in life. The beauty around us, from grass to the sun, all fashioned by love, by our glorious God. So just take a moment of peace in this place and soak up the beauty, God's love and God's grace. May the Lord of flowers share his beauty with you. May the Lord of water feed you in the dry places of your soul. May the Lord of love give you peace. And the blessing of God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit be among you and remain with you always. Amen. Please do enjoy the rest of what we have to offer this afternoon. Thank you all for coming. See you next year.